Imagine the people's beloved Kong, but as a behemoth robot. In the vast world of Toho's fantastical creatures, there exists a mechanical counterpart of King Kong. Initially, this mechanoid kaiju wasn't presented as a villain, but rather as a tool to reach places that were too unsafe for humans. So in this marvelous video, we will explore the story of Mechani-Kong, also known as the Kong of Steel or Robot Kong. It is believed that this ape made of bolts and steel was the real inspiration behind the iconic Mecha-Godzilla. Why was Mechani-Kong created? What futuristic powers does he have? How did Kong take him down? And how would he fare in a fight against Godzilla? Let's find out! Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. Tracing the origin of Mechani-Kong. Mechani-Kong made his first appearance in the animated television series The King Kong Show, which aired in 1966. He is first shown in the episode titled Mechani-Kong. In the show, he is portrayed as the antagonist who goes metalhead to apehead against King Kong. Doctor Who, no, not the benevolent time-traveling doctor, but an international crime and mastermind scientist, created a mechanical Kong for his own diabolical schemes. Mechani-Kong is shown to be a giant robotic ape clearly inspired by the real King Kong. In the animated show, he is colored very similar to a real ape and has just two metal squares in place of his eyes. There was also this control booth on top of Mechani-Kong's head in which Doctor Who sat and operated his robot kaiju. Doctor Who wished revenge on Kong because of a fight he bitterly lost previously. In an attempt of a smear campaign on the real Kong's name, Doctor Who made Mechani-Kong attack the island of New Guinea. The military assumed this to be the real Kong and began to retaliate. When the military commander discussed this whole fiasco with Dr. Bond, he hurriedly made his way to Mechani-Kong. Dr. Bond and his children were responsible for keeping an eye on Kong. They accompanied the King of the Apes and pitted him against his mechanical counterpart. Much to everyone's horror, Kong's punches barely dented his kaiju opponent. Then, out of sheer frustration, Kong headbutts Mechani-Kong, who then falls into the ocean. This resulted in him short-circuiting and breaking down for good. Doctor Who was forced to summon helicopters to take the decrepit parts of Mechani-Kong away. Good triumphed over evil, and Kong emerged as the victor. In the Toho film titled King Kong Escapes, which came out in 1967, the story follows a different direction. In the movie, Doctor Who designed the first model of Mechani-Kong for another purpose. In this movie, Mechani-Kong is shown to be a classic robot with bolts holding together his silver metallic joints. This iteration of Mechani-Kong comes with an array of cool abilities. Doctor Who was approached by a strange woman named Madame Piranha. She was willing to fund him on a secret, probably illegal project for her country. Doctor Who then built Mechani-Kong to extract the highly radioactive element X from underneath the Arctic surface. However, the levels of irradiation were too high, even for the robot kaiju, and he severely malfunctioned. As a desperate resort, Doctor Who managed to hypnotize the real Kong to complete this task, but Kong eventually fought off the trance due to a combination of the strength of his own mind and the shouts of Susan Watson. She was a nurse that Kong took a liking to. He escaped Doctor Who's clutches and ran away to Tokyo. By this point, Doctor Who invented a reinvigorated Mechani-Kong 2.0. The final battle scene of the movie took place in Tokyo. Kong and Mechani-Kong finally faced each other. The robotic Kong grabbed Nurse Watson and scrambled up the side of the Tokyo Tower. Doctor Who spoke through a loudspeaker, threatened to drop Susan to her inevitable death. Kong didn't understand the warning and followed Mechani-Kong, who, true to his word, dropped Nurse Watson from his robot hand, but Kong caught her just in time and delivered her to safety. Doctor Who's mysterious benefactor, Madame Piranha, rushed to Mechani-Kong's control panel on Doctor Who's ship and destroyed the controls. This resulted in Mechani-Kong malfunctioning, and he fell from a great height off the Tokyo Tower. He landed on the ground in pieces. The tyranny of Mechani-Kong ended in the movie at the cost of Madame Piranha's life. Powers and abilities of Mechani-Kong. Initially made as a tool for mining dangerous ores, then being turned into a weapon of mass destruction, it would be interesting to explore some of Mechani-Kong's abilities. In the movie King Kong Escapes, we see Mechani-Kong use an interesting skill in his fight against King Kong. When the Mechani-Kong was sent to retrieve Kong from Tokyo, the colossal robot used a special light located on the top of his head. This is the hypnotic bulb that he uses on his foes to push them into a trance of compliance. Kong was rendered immobilized for a few moments, but a UN officer named Jiro Nomura aimed and shot at the light. The filament burned through and Kong snapped out of the trance. Supplementing the hypnotic bulb are the blinding light rays that shoot out of Mechani-Kong's eyes. These are also known known as high beam eyes, as they blind whoever is standing in front of a Kong of steel. Originally, this feature was added for the purpose of lighting up the darkest ravines of the Arctic to excavate the element X, but it proved to be handy in combat as well. King Kong and Mechani-Kong turned out to be nearly equal in titanic strength. However, the Kong, made of flesh and blood, would eventually tire out. This is far from the case of Mechani-Kong, Doctor Who's confident claim of "my Kong would never tire." Even if the real Kong seemed faster in the fight, means that Mechani-Kong has limitless endurance. His strength is shown in other ways, such as tirelessly digging through layers of hard ice, climbing the Tokyo Tower at leisure, and even holding back Godzilla at one point. This occurred in the manga Godzilla, King of the Monsters. First model of Mechani-Kong had a belt of gas bombs that were filled with highly flammable napalm. This arsenal was easily accessible as he wore it as a grenade belt. Godzilla vs. Mechani-Kong. Did you know that if the project had been followed through with, we would have gotten a Godzilla vs. Mechani-Kong movie? After the success of the movie Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, Toho Company Limited began brainstorming for a movie that would be worthy enough to follow the previous one. They considered two options, Godzilla vs. Mechani-Kong and Godzilla vs. Gigamoth, which would also be known as Godzilla vs. Mothra. The potential that Godzilla vs. Mechani-Kong held was taken into account and even given a revised title of Micro Universe and Godzilla. The story followed would have been action-packed. The Japanese Self-Defense Forces designed a mechanical counterpart of Kong as protection against the monstrous Godzilla, also to prevent him from completely annihilating Japan. The ulterior motive was also to inject a group of humans inside Godzilla that would simply rip him apart from the inside out. Sadly, this plot was completely thrown out the window, and audiences were given Godzilla vs. Mothra instead. The passionate special effects director of the Heisei period of Godzilla films, Koichi Kawakita, managed to honor the scrap plot in a way. In the movie Rebirth of Mothra 2, we see Mothra Leo break apart into several smaller Mothras to attack the antagonist's insides. Another appearance of Godzilla vs. Mechani-Kong dynamic was made in the Kodansha manga series titled Godzilla, King of the Monsters. It was first published in 1992 and told readers the story of Godzilla facing off various kaiju foes. These kaiju are genetically engineered or brought back to life by the mad scientists like Dr. Oniyama. In one of the issues, Dr. Oniyama manufactures Mechani-Kong and pairs him up with Mecha-Godzilla. Even with the force of this robotic duo, Godzilla wasn't defeated. In their confrontation, Godzilla employs a fighting move known as the suplex, breaking off Mechani-Kong's metal arm. With his controls short-circuiting yet again, Mechani-Kong crashes into Mecha-Godzilla and the two hurtle into the ocean. Though a lot of the storylines in this manga end with Godzilla using his signature atomic breath to obliterate his opponents. How can Mechani-Kong be adapted to the Monsterverse? The Monsterverse is a vast and extensive assembly of the deadliest titans and gigantic kaiju. The topic of the Monsterverse is constantly revisited. Most recently, we even got a new addition in the form of Scar King, which audiences will get to see in the upcoming movies. Have you thought about the possibility of Mechani-Kong finding a place in the Monsterverse? Where exactly would he fit and how? Let's discuss this through various speculations and theories made by fans of the Monsterverse. It was observed in the ending credits of the movie Godzilla, the King of the Monsters, there is a mention of Monarch working on a project that consisted of building a mechanical giant. Some are of the belief that this is actually Mechani-Kong. Out of all the monsters of the Monsterverse, King Kong isn't considered as the strongest titan. After all, he isn't biologically immortal, and as the years go by, he grows older and weaker in fights. We've already seen Kong sporting a metal hand brace. He might get these cybernetic additions to aid him in fights, but eventually Kong would draw his last breath in battle. Tying this plot into the first speculation, Monarch would sweep in and try to revive a dying Kong. The organization would build on various technological enhancements to bring him back to life. However, there is plenty of evidence that proves the fact that if someone is brought back from the dead, they never return the same. It is better to let the dead remain on the other side once they have passed. Monarch would then invade this shell of Kong even further and alter his mind. Imagine a revived Kong with a cybernetic brain and computerized insides. Another plotline that could be followed would be similar to the story of King Kong escapes. A mysterious organization comes across a dead Kong ape. They revive and cybernetically enhance him as well. The organization then felt the need to employ the newly made Mechani-Kong to mine a highly radioactive material. Due to extremely high levels of radiation, Mechani-Kong can only work for a limited time period. King Kong, along with Monarch, comes across Mechani-Kong mining deep into the trenches. The King of the Apes and the Frankenstein-like Steel Kong face off, but Mechani-Kong isn't designed for combat but for utility, hence Kong easily defeats this mining robot. The group decides to collect the scraps and rebuild Mechani-Kong with features features like gas canisters and a sonic screech similar to the blinding high beam eyes. This new fighter, Mechani-Kong, could be powered by a biofuel energy source to keep him going in a confrontation. Naturally, if Mechani-Kong would be integrated as a character in the present-day Monsterverse, he would have to put up an impressive performance. If Apex Cybernetics could invent a robotic monstrosity such as Mecha-Godzilla, then the idea of Mechani-Kong sounds reasonable. Anticipating as the franchise moves forward and the worlds of King Kong and Godzilla collide, there definitely lies a possibility of a mechanical King of the Apes being conceived one day. Interesting facts about Mechani-Kong. Did you know that in the Japanese version of the King Kong show, Mechani-Kong is referred to as Roboto Kongu or Robot Kong? The steel ape is much definitely a fascinating kaiju that deserves more screen time. Much to fans' disappointment, the fact that the idea of a separate Godzilla vs. Mechani-Kong film was scrapped was revealed during the Godzilla Birth Festival in 2010. The theme music of Mechani-Kong was sampled from the music of the military march heard in King Kong vs. Godzilla, which came out in 1962. This music was also featured in the film Godzilla vs. Mecha-Godzilla 2. In a way, music ties all these films together and the viewers are reminded of Mechani-Kong. In the cartoon show The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, the makers referenced Mechani-Kong and created a parody version of him named Mecha-Gorillasaur. In the Muppets show, a version of Mechani-Kong makes an appearance in the form of the Gorilla Detector. Koichi Kawakita, the special effects director of all the Godzilla films of the Heisei period, was a huge fan of Mechani-Kong. He wished to see the robotic ape make an appearance in several movies, but Toho ultimately decided that it could lead to a legal mess to use a character inspired by King Kong in one of their own films. Since the Godzilla vs. Mechani-Kong project was scrapped, Kawakita found a way to honor this character. The original idea of a team of humans flying out of Mechani-Kong and into Godzilla was inspired by the 1966 film The Fantastic Voyage. He also paid a tribute to Mechani-Kong in the show Phantom Star God Justerizers, wherein the monster is designed based on Mechani-Kong. Even the film Super Fleet Caesar X, the movie, took the unused designs of Mechani-Kong and fashioned them to fit the film's plotline. Mind-blowing appearance of Mechani-Kong in other forms of media. So far, we've seen Mechani-Kong make an appearance in the Rankin-based animated television series The King Kong Show. Then he showed up in the movie King Kong Escapes, which featured him as one of the main characters. He's made appearances in games and manga. We've already explored a comic storyline of a Mechani-Kong built by eccentric Dr. Oniyama. He makes an appearance in the Konami video game titled Konami YY World, which was released in 1988. In the game, Mechani-Kong is seen in the city stage, which is known to be the 5th stage. He poses as one of the many occurring enemies in the game. There is also an enemy named Boss Conger, who, as the name suggests, is quite a tough boss of the 5th stage. In the 1993 trivia game named Adventure Godzilla, we spot an adorably sketched Mechani-Kong along with Maguma. Marvelous verdict. Here we've come to the end of the exploration of Mechani-Kong. It's a shame to see that this story wasn't perpetuated further by the creators. Godzilla vs. Mechani-Kong is one potential story arc, but what if we consider Mechani-Kong versus Mecha-Godzilla? Who would win in the colossal combat and reign as the robotic victor? The Monsterverse has taken a new direction in doing in-depth explorations of various kaiju origin stories. For this reason, fans shouldn't write off Mechani-Kong as a completely obsolete character. The way Mechani-Kong was portrayed in King Kong Escapes can be considered as pretty tame. There is still promise held in the fact that he could be shown as a sinister villain with highly advanced weaponry at his disposal, or he could be shown as an ally to either Godzilla or Kong. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.